The first season of Monarch Legacy of Monsters has concluded, so let's talk about it. Hi, my name is Sean, and I love to talk about movies and TV way too much. With that in mind, go ahead and join me down below in the comments section. Let me know your thoughts on Monarch Legacy of Monsters if you've seen it. This will be both non-spoiler and spoiler review, so if you want to talk about specifics and spoilers, just put a spoiler warning up down below in the comment section. To the point that I just made, I'll give my general impressions on the season at the beginning of this. That will be spoiler-free, and then I'll go into the specific good and bad parts where I will go into spoilers. So whether you've seen it, haven't seen it, want to know specifics, or don't, now you know. And let's get started with my general thoughts on the season. And when it comes to Monarch Legacy of Monsters, this show is distinctly a mixed bag for me, where the best parts were just as good as I hoped that they would be in the ways that I expected, as well as some unexpected ways. But the bad parts were just as bad as I feared in the ways that I thought it might be bad, and in ways I was not expecting it to be bad. But it does come together in the last couple of episodes in a way, so you end the season on a high note. Easily the best episode of the season is the finale, and it does so in a way that made me go, oh, I hope we get more of this. I hope that we didn't lose this, and I hope this is able to continue onward. I'm excited for more of this, despite being incredibly frustrated with many episodes in the middle of this season. So to kind of unpack a lot of what I was saying there, it's a mixed bag. When you look at Kurt Russell, I was very excited. Oh, Kurt Russell is going to be one of the stars of a Godzilla TV show with actual budget and production value. Wow, that's awesome. And his son is playing the same character, but decades earlier. That's pretty cool. And in the case of the MonsterVerse, of course, Kong Skull Island was already set decades in the past. And so we're really fleshing out the history of the MonsterVerse using a legend like Kurt Russell and finding a way to de-age him in a way that's 100% convincing and kind of cool as a backstory. And his character, without question, is the best character on the show. And it's not close. It's not like there's the runner-up that's right. No, I mean, it's like he's the best character. And in both phases of his life, in both contexts, he's just kind of the more interesting character. The other runner-ups are the other characters in the past who are also really good characters. We'll get into more of this in just a second. But because they establish him as, you see so much of his life, it's done in a way where there's mystery surrounding him. He's a person of action, but he's also not totally altruistic. He has loyalty to government structures, but also questions them. There's just a lot of things to him that makes him compelling and interesting. And when you're seeing him at two very different phases of life with this big, gigantic, mysterious middle section, you want to keep learning more. Obviously, Kurt Russell brings exponentially more star power than anyone else in this show, and the next runner-up in here is his up-and-coming son, who's getting all sorts of big kind of roles in here, and so it works really well. And I thought he'd be great, and he was, and he's a character that's fun to see with the way that he's used. I like the way that we're fleshing out the in-betweens of, we've got Kong Skull Island with this mysterious organization that was already established at the point in time that movie took place in the 70s. And then you have Monarch, of course, showing up in the more modern timeline of the stories. And there's years gaps between our Godzilla films. And so what was Monarch up to? What were these people doing with the information that John Goodman's character, what was kind of happening there? Where did he come from? Where did that, and it fleshes all of that out in a lot of times in very interesting ways. In some of the later episodes, they start really expanding the lore, and there's stuff that's kind of Easter eggs, but also are important pieces of the narrative, establishing details for Godzilla vs. Kong and where certain things came from. And if you like lore and expanding things, there's a bunch of really cool stuff that they do with that. Also, when it comes to our characters, they're all kind of designed to be, like, no one is just the mustache twirling villain that's just evil. And our protagonists that are trying to do the right thing, they're not devoid of faults. And even kind of our lead characters in the modern timeline, the young people, it's unclear who they should side with and why. They design the characters, the organizations to just be right enough, just be wrong enough. Kurt Russell's character is noble enough, clearly acting in the right direction, but also a little crazy in what he's kind of doing. And like, why did you do what you do? Everyone's just flawed enough to be interesting. It's not clear cut. And so the show's built around intrigue and mystery. And they build that into even the morality of our characters, and it's not exactly clear who's right and wrong. We generally know what side we should be on, but we don't always know exactly why or what people are doing. And so it constantly kind of creates these little hooks that suck you back in, looking for answers as to what is going on with all of this. So a lot of that I really liked. And as you move into the last 2 episodes, they start pulling together the plot lines. They start giving you answers as to Kurt Russell's character, what's been going on, when did Monarch learn certain things, what are they up to, what is he up to, and then just kind of embracing the established lore that we already have. And you immediately go, oh, this is the best stuff. The journey to get here was patchy. We'll get to that in a second. This is paying off really well. I like, okay, this is what I wanted this show to be. And then you get to the finale and it's the most emotional. It has the most spectacle. It builds the lore out in interesting ways and continues kind of this situation of very complicated relationships, very complicated morality of our characters. It does all the stuff that the previous episode did done well, but better, plus stuff the previous episodes hadn't done, and it's easily the most emotionally potent and resonant of all the episodes. Without question, it ends on the high note, a very high note that makes you go, yeah, this is what I wanted all along. So much so that you forget all the stuff that frustrated you, and you just want more of the show. But to that stuff that frustrated me. So from the beginning, it takes its time to get going, where we're establishing this brother and sister, and they're getting sucked into this world of monsters in the post-Godzilla world. And at first they're fine, but they're not interesting enough. They're not compelling enough. They don't have personalities that are flashy, that suck you in. They're just pretty normal people that discover that they're part of this legacy of monsters, but like just not in an interesting enough way. So it's kind of dull until Kurt Russell joins in. Like I liked it, but it was like, all right, I'm waiting for it to kick in. Then Kurt Russell shows up and things go into high gear. Or every time it cuts to the past with Wyatt Russell and everything going on, they're like, this is cool. I like this. This is good. But we keep going to the present. And every time it's in the present, we're just like learning about their family, but I don't care enough about them for this to really work. And as you start moving into the middle of the season, these 3 lead characters in the present that aren't Kurt Russell are just so insufferable. Where you have a son who is trying to figure out his family and what's going on with his dad, but they write it so poorly that he doesn't in any way come off like a real human. Without wanting to get too much into it, there's parts where he's part of something incredibly fantastical happens. Titans, Godzilla, like he experiences something on this level of like, wow, that almost kills him. He should be dead. He narrowly survives. And the very next scene, all he can think about is to whine about his dad, which doesn't feel like a real person. It doesn't feel like he's able to like respond in any sort of reasonable way to what's happening to him. And he's whiny and not paying attention to, dude, you just almost got killed by a Titan. And so it's just bad writing, nonsense writing, and also just feel like rabbit trails. They go off on a whole episode about the backstory of May in the show. There's the 2 siblings and then May is tied to one of them and then gets very entrenched in it. They do an episode about her backstory that you hear her backstory and you go, oh, that's the big mystery of what's going on with her. Like, this isn't compelling enough. It's not interesting enough. Like, you gave a detail, you go, okay. But much like everything else about these three characters, they're just not interesting. They're just not compelling. There's nothing that gives them spark to them. And at times they're written horribly. So she's makes choices that makes her very unlikable. And they give her a backstory that's not really compelling. And she doesn't have a personality that's flashy enough, charismatic enough to suck you in. Contrast this with Kurt Russell's character, who is interesting because of his backstory, does interesting things, and he's played by Kurt Russell, who is just obviously a charismatic leading man he was a child actor. So he's got over 60 years of experience having a screen presence and drawing people in. And it goes from him to substantially less charismatic actors playing substantially less interesting characters, and their writing is much weaker. And so the show really kind of gets lost after like episode 3 or 4. I don't remember exactly which one it was, where you're just kind of wandering around for a little bit. And there's like redundant plot lines, and you're like, where's this going? Why are people doing things? Episode 7 in particular, really bad writing. Great details about the lore, but the details are fun. The writing for the episode, the actual plot of the episode is terrible. And so it's just a really frustrating mixed bag where it felt like they were figuring out what the show was and what worked as they went along. And they put way too much focus on some of the least interesting stuff. These three Zoomers or whatever generation they are that are whiny, poorly written, and not enough on the super interesting stuff, which is Kurt Russell's character and really all the stuff in the past. I keep pointing out Kurt Russell because he's Kurt Russell and Wyatt Russell. They pop a little bit more. But all of the things about the start of the Monarch, the two people he's working with, there is kind of like a love triangle or complicated relationship there that kind of goes on. All of that is interesting. It's played with subtlety. It feels human. It doesn't feel like melodrama. And so you really buy into all of that. And then it cuts to guy whining about his dad in 2015. It's just frustrating. It's a very mixed bag for me on a lot of this sort of stuff. So, but the stuff that worked really well. And by the end of it, I want more of that. Learn from this season. Please learn from this season. Fix the focus. I'll say this. It's 10 episodes. I think you shrink it down to 8 episodes. You cut out a couple of the filler things and the weird rabbit trails and redundancies. Cut a little bit of that out. Take the budget and monsters of the 2 episodes we cut. Sprinkle them throughout these episodes a little bit more. Maybe even you make it 7 episodes and cut 3 episodes of budget, 3 episodes of like Titan stuff, sprinkle it on the other 7 episodes. So they're all a little bit more action based, all move a little bit faster and don't have stupid redundancy and rabbit trails and dumb backstories. And all of a sudden you have a really nice little Godzilla spin-off show with Kurt freaking Russell in the lead and his son who's carrying the torch wonderfully himself. There's a lot in here I really enjoyed, but it is absolutely a mixed bag. So if you're a casual Godzilla fan, it might not be the right one for you. You have to have the patience to, like, it does pay off in the last 2 episodes, but it takes work to get there. If you love lore shows, it might also just work for you on that level, but it's not as fantastic as I was quite hoping, but the fantastic moments are as fantastic as I was hoping. All right, let's move on to some spoiler talk and diving into the good stuff when it comes to the spoiler talk. As I mentioned before, all of the best stuff probably revolves around the past, the backstory of Kurt Russell, or Kurt and Wyatt Russell's character, Shaw, and the complexities of the early eras where you have this guy that is not the scientist, he's not really looking to get involved in any of this and just kind of stumbles into it. And he's a person that's willing to do the right thing, but understands the complexities of the military and gets wrapped up into it. And the lesser defined, like the show keeps focusing on what were in the files, what were in the files, what were in the files. But the more interesting question surrounding Monarch is, why did Monarch get so corrupt? What happened that they started with people that really got it? And even the general guy that was over Shaw, he's general guy. He's military guy. He doesn't get the science, but he's not written to be crazy general guy. There's the side to it of we have to blow up Godzilla, but also he'll fund their science. He does understand it. And so there's that complexity where you're like, okay, where did it go off course? And you go throughout the season and they finally give the answers in episode 9 where you figure out like, why does Shaw look too good for his age? And they keep referencing it, and it just natural casting stuff. You kind of go, what's going on here? And they finally give you the answer about it. It ties into the mysteries of what's kind of going on, calling them the tinfoil hat people. Why did they get called the tinfoil hat people? Where was the disconnect there? All of that stuff. And they do it in a way where you go, yeah, that was really interesting. That's the best stuff. That's what I wanted this show to be. And you hear it and you go, oh crap, that's what happened here. Shaw didn't come back for so long that the people that had he come back sooner while they were still in power, while they were still alive, that would have changed all of this. The information, but so much time had passed, bureaucracy things happened that it just was interpreted differently by the time he did come back. And you go, oh, that's good. That's what I wanted this to be. I mentioned this a little bit before, but like the love triangle with the trio, where you have an episode where you see like it almost went the other direction. The show starts to imply, like I was like, is the twist of the show going to be that these kids are actually his kids? Is that where this is headed? But it doesn't overplay it. It doesn't go down that direction. Like they show there's something there that it could have been, but also they make it pretty clear because of who Shaw is. Almost the exact thing that drew her to him is also the exact reason why she really belongs over here. This is the better fit. And they never overplay it. They don't turn him bitter. They don't have him turn on his friend. But he is heartbroken, and that's so much more interesting than the easier one of, you took my girl, or any of that stuff. And they make Shaw a better character by not ratcheting up false conflict that doesn't need to be there. They do that crap with the Zoomers and stuff. It's ratcheted up conflict that doesn't feel earned. They don't do it in the stuff in the past. And so that's the best stuff. That's the stuff where you go, yeah, I like that. This is what I wanted. This works. And it's interesting. And it adds detail and it adds humanity. And it just gives a history to all of it of why he is the way that he is, responding to these characters the way that he is. So that worked really, really nicely. Was there other things in here to talk about that worked for me? Of course, you get to the finale where they get sucked into the tunnel that drops them in this in-between world where we're kind of fleshing out our mythology of what it takes to get to the hollow earth and these wormholes in this other realm as to exactly what it is. They're probably wisely very ambiguous about it. We get there and we kind of linger in this space and realize there's like time dilation or whatever phrases they want to, other shows, movies have used to describe it, whatever Interstellar described it as. And they do a little bit of that, and they're able to create that scenario where this character that we had just accepted very early on was dead. We weren't waiting for her to come back. It was just accepted she was dead. And they find a way to bring her back. And you don't realize that you weren't expecting it, but also it brings so much emotional resonance and is able to close out a lot of stuff in a satisfying way of these super annoying Zoomers. We get emotional payoff there. We get something interesting there. We get an emotional bookend to Shaw's journey to where, what happy ending could he have? Because he obviously can't save the day and stop the Titans from coming back. We know that they're coming in Godzilla, King of the Monsters. So what can you do is you make him right all along, and you reunite him with the person that he cares about the most, and you make it in a way that is just so like keeps playing out the way you want him to be, that he just truly did care about her. He loved her enough that he was happy for her. He loved her enough that he is totally fine if this is the end of his life. I don't know that he's dead. I would think they would be fools to not bring him back. And we don't see him die. We see him get sucked out. And we've established you can get sucking out, does all sorts of things. It's kind of waiting for a post-credit scene of him dusting himself off or something like that. But they could bring him back. There's room in there. Also, because of the time jumping of the show, they could also just bring him back. But he's just, his potential final moments in life is just to say thank you. He's so happy that, I'm fine if I die because of you. I did something that mattered. Because of you, I had people that I cared about. Even though I lost you for decades. Even though I'm about to die and I just got you back, he got her back. And that's all that matters. That's it's so emotionally profound. We'll get into the bad writing shortly, but even the way that they play out the way that he reveals himself, he suddenly has a different demeanor talking to her than everyone else. And there's always a little bit of a disconnect between the performances of Wyatt and Kurt. Not in a way that broke the continuity, but in the sense of he's very different in the 50s than he is in the present. And then they revert him. Kurt Russell starts acting like Wyatt as soon as she's back, and it is there's just a different demeanor, especially when he first introduces himself back to her, and handled in a way that feels human. Feels like this, they actually have a character responding in the sense of she just realized her entire world is quite literally gone. Almost like everyone she knows is gone. Even the ones that are still alive, they are not who she knew. Her son is now dramatically older than her. And she's processing that, and it plays real. So it has these moments that are so good, so satisfying, that what you wanted it to be. And then, of course, the finale, you get Godzilla showing up, being the hero, and all of that fun stuff. So you get heroic sacrifices, you get emotional payoff. Works really well. I'm sure there's more I could be talking about in here. That's the problem with putting all my thoughts in a single episode video on here. But there's some stuff I got to talk about on the bad in terms of spoilers. So let's move on to the bad. So when it comes to the bad on here, there's just the general stuff I've already talked about, that it's a little bit slow. Of course, there's not as many Titans as you want, and it's tough to use Titans in the show when you have an established timeline. So you can't just have Godzilla show up in New York City or something like that, because that would have been talked about in one of the movies that have already come out. So there's that complication that always kind of restricts what they can do. But the big one you just have to zero in on is our three characters in the modern times, our three leads, young people, are just not good characters. They're not interesting characters. And you can see how they were trying to have more complex, dense characters than what you get in the movies, but they just chose personalities that are just bland. What trait would you describe them as? The son is kind of whiny. They're all kind of whiny, but they don't have a thing that pops out that you would say that's the thing about them. None of them. And so I talked about this before to get specifics, but on the son, they finally find the dad. They show up in the middle of nowhere. The dad is gone in the middle of nowhere. They show up, they find him, and they realize the dad is sending them away. And immediately after that, they start trying to run away. Godzilla wakes up, the mountain they're on collapses, a helicopter crashes and kills people, and they narrowly survive all of this. And in the very next scene we get with this guy, he goes, "Do you think Dad was really flagging us away?" What? Is the writer a moron, or is the character a moron? Was your dad flagging you away right before Godzilla showed up and the ground underneath you collapsed? Yeah, of course he was flagging you away. You were about to die. You're lucky you didn't die. And then the next scene, he says the line, "He took one look at us and ran away." You mean right before Godzilla showed up? Like, what are you talking about? Godzilla showed up. You were on a mountain that hill that collapsed because Godzilla showed up. Literal people died. You watched a helicopter crash right next to you. You went through the wreckage, saw the wreckage and the dead bodies. You heard someone say to you, no one survived, and your takeaway was your dad ran away because he saw you? Who wrote this? Like, what is going on that this is a thing that was actually written? And so, like, the writing at the beginning of episode 7 in particular, like, the show in episode 6 started to feel like the writers got lost, where it's like there's 2 different mechanisms by which Monarch is able to find where they're at. Like, there's redundancies, and it's unclear, like, what are they trying to do with May giving away, like, they have May betray them, but it doesn't mean anything. May's not really betraying them. It doesn't really matter to the plot, except to add a conflict that divides them, but it doesn't. Like, they're like, go get out of here, May. We never want to talk to you again. Episode ends, and the next episode begins, and you have the daughter being like, hey, where's May? She went to the bathroom a while ago. And the son's like, well, you told her to go away. She's like, well, we got to find her, though. And suddenly they're deeply concerned about where she went. Like, it didn't matter. So the writing goes like off the, like they really didn't know what they were doing and throwing stuff in here that doesn't add up. But you get episode 7 and just the way people are acting. As I said, the son is like, he just looked at us and ran away. Right. When Godzilla showed up, he did run away when Godzilla showed up. That stuff. But it felt so, and then like the scientist guy that survives a helicopter crash with no injuries walks in and they start yelling at him, and like that, some of that makes sense, but he doesn't go, guys, I just lost all my friends. I just survived a helicopter crash. I'm just trying to, like, I'm literally just trying to survive. I'm not chasing you the way you think I'm chasing you. Look at me. Look at me. He doesn't act like a human. He's joking around. Like, immediately I went, something's off with the writing here. And so I looked at who wrote the episode, and almost every, like, I think all the other episodes are written by the main writing staff, and it's like, whether they wrote the episode or not, they're part of the story group, or they're a producer, showrunner. And then this episode is only one written by this specific person. I recognized the name, looked her up, and she's like one of these, like, she's a comic book writer that has written a bunch of the super weird, controversial stuff from DC over the last several years. And so you can like look it up, and she wrote like, I was like, I Am Not Starfire, about Starfire's teenage daughter that's not like her mom. And it's just like this very juvenile CW drama, and kids rebelling against their parents. Their parents just happen to be a superhero, that crap. They got her to write this episode. And like, I literally wrote in my notes the stuff that I mentioned before I started talking about the writer. Like, what is going on here? No one's acting like a human. Everyone's characterization is weird. It's kind of going down these strange rabbit trails. Wrote that down. And then I read this about the writer, and I went, okay, that makes sense. And all of a sudden in this episode, they'd been hinting that maybe the daughter and May, there was a thing there. And it was getting weird because it was like, wait a minute. The son and the May had a thing. That's how May got pulled into this. There was a thing there. You get to the end of this episode, and in front of the brother, the sister is like leaning and hugging May, holding hands, like clearly implying romantic interest right in front of her brother that was romantically linked to this person. And it treats it as if he's like, that's cool. This is normal. There's nothing remotely weird about any of this. The characterizations make no sense. They're like, they have May betray them and immediately have them like, we got to go save May. We have to do anything in our power to save May. We can't hunt down our dad until we save May. We got to save May. Right after they had to get out of here, May. We hate you. We never want to talk to you again. We got to go save May. Just nonsense writing. Like, they just like you're watching it like, what happened here? Oh, they brought in a writer that doesn't know how to write mature characters. They brought in a very immature writer. I don't know the lady. I don't know anything about her really, except to say that she seems to be famous for writing immature things. And that's what this was. You have all these other character arcs in here with Lee, the stuff in the past that are mature, and then you get to this and it's just bad. Horrible characterizations, terrible writing, whiny characters, nonsense. It goes in places it doesn't matter. We don't need to go down any of these paths with these characters. That's what they decide to do. So, interesting, like just so frustrating that they did all of that. And of course, there just weren't enough Titans in the season, of course. Like there's episodes without any Titans and you go, come on now. You gotta have something. You gotta have some amount of that in here. So circling back to what I said at the beginning, this show to me was a gigantic mixed bag. There were things that I thought were great. There were things that were exactly everything I hoped this show could be, with the lore, with Kurt Russell, some Godzilla action. And then it has some, like the writing of episode 7 is unbelievably bad. Hopefully they learn their lessons. I don't really trust Hollywood and these studios to learn their lessons. They always seem to learn the wrong lessons, but maybe they will learn the right lessons and we will get a second season that does all the great stuff again. I don't know what that would look like. I don't know where they would go. It seems like they, with the lore and the Shaw character, the birth of Monarch, that seems to be probably some of the best stuff they had, and then they still watered that down with the crap, but we'll see. Let me know what you guys thought down below. Remember, this is both spoiler and non-spoiler, so if you want to talk specifics, just put a little warning at the beginning of it so someone doesn't get one of the big plot points spoiled for you. Thank you so much for watching. Keep talking movies and TV too much. Bye-bye.